All right. So this is all about meeting H5P. So we're maximizing engagement using educational technologies. The QR code on the screen is there for you. It is a link to our faculty resources page here at MTSU Online. I think sometimes it can be a little difficult to find things on our website, not MTSU Online, but just generally on our website at MTSU. So I thought I would put this here so you could scan it if you wanted to and have easy access to it later. There's a lot of great resources there about H5P and all kinds of things that may be able to help you throughout your developments of courses, whether they're online or otherwise. And so, our, well, there it goes. I was like, why is my screen frozen? Okay, so during our time together, right, we're instructional designers, so we always have goals. So we're going to introduce this technology and create an account. We will go through the create an account process. And then we're also going to explore the 4 reasons why this technology improves the quality of your online courses. That is not to say there aren't more than 4 reasons, but we're going to stick to the 4 reasons for the purposes of this format. And then we're going to briefly demonstrate some H5P capabilities in D2L and give you some practical examples. Again, it's really about just exposing you and introducing you to this technology. And then if you want more information about it, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what is H5P? So it stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which doesn't mean a lot to most people, I would assume. But in regular people terms and non-tech speak, it allows the user to easily create interactive and responsive content that can be fully integrated into D2L or Pressbooks. A couple of things about that statement. Pressbooks is not going to be the focus of what we're talking about today, but you can use this content within Pressbooks if you decide to publish one. There have been individuals, some of whom are in this call, that have published a Pressbook. So if you have information about that or want information about that, I encourage you to talk to them. But the reason why I put this information in here more importantly is because it's easy. I am not a technologist whatsoever. I'm an instructional designer, and they're very different. And I was exposed to this technology through a QM workshop, actually, and it was being shown in Canvas. And I thought, well, what do we have that's equivalent, or what can we do that's equivalent? There must be something for D2L, and it turned out it's the same thing. There is a free account for H5P because it is an open educational resource, which you can get at h5p.org. But I was interested in having some sort of account for MTSU as a whole and what we could do about that. And after a little research, found out that there were 4 individuals on campus who had accounts. And we worked together, particularly Scott and I, and Scott was instrumental in getting a institutional account campus-wide for us so that we could easily do these things. Because again, it's easy. Faculty are very burnt on having to learn new technology, especially once you learn it, then they change it and you have to learn it again. So the fact that this particular technology is so easy to use and it's very intuitive for most of the content types, I think that's a really important selling point because faculty's biggest constraint is time, and learning how to do something new is just time you don't have when, at least for some of these creation types, it's really, really simple and straightforward. So there are a lot of possibilities when it comes to H5P content. And so I just want these to come up, not because I envision that you're going to be able to read all of them even, but I wanted you to be able to see there are about 50 different content types currently for H5P. And that is everything from quiz type items, so your true, false, multiple choice, those kinds of things, to flashcards, dialogue cards, fill in the blank, drag the words, branching scenarios. There's just all kinds of things that you can create here in H5P to help students connect more to the material and or connect more to the course, depending on what your goal is. And so I just wanted to kind of give you this brief snapshot of there's a lot of choices out here for you to be able to play with and explore when you get to that point. So the purpose, more so than anything else for this workshop, is to really talk about the why. Why do you want to use this technology? Because we never want to use technology for technology's sake. It shouldn't be superfluous because students really see through that pretty quickly. So you really want to think about your purposes for any kind of technology that you use. This is no different. And when you're considering those whys, the first thing that you want to think about, of course, is that it does increase engagement. Students will be able to interact with content in a much more in a way that's much more consistent with what, say, for example, they're used to doing on their phone, or games that they potentially play, in order to get them to, again, more deeply learn that content instead of just, say, cramming for an exam. Not that I'm saying that there shouldn't be exams. FERPA security, we want to do everything possible to keep students FERPA secure. And the easiest and most straightforward way to do that is to keep them only within items in which they use their single sign-on. And by being able to embed H5P directly into D2L, they are using their single sign-on, and we're not asking them to go to an outside source to engage in something. So for example, if you're using a poll everywhere or maybe something from Kahoot, and you're sending them outside of the system, this is a great way to incorporate those same types of contents into your course and keep them directly within D2L, thereby ensuring their purpose security. Then we also have accessibility. Accessibility and the gaps that we have in accessibility as a university wide across the country, no matter what university you were looking at, accessibility and the gaps that we had there really came to light during COVID. I'm not talking about accommodation, that's something very different, but when I'm talking about accessibility, I'm talking about different content types for students to engage with, whether it's captioned videos or maybe transcripted podcasts. Of course, there's always reading that should be able to be read with screen readers. And all of these things in H5P, all of these different content types meet these basic accessibility standards already, because we want to do everything we can to beat basic accessibility standards regardless of the course type. And so by using these tools, we are able to add fun items that are already accessible for you, with the exception of having to add alt tags or alt text, excuse me, to images that you may upload, and then incorporating closed captions for any videos that you may use. Aside from that, the content types here within H5P have already been made accessible for you, so you don't actually have to do anything to them, which I think is really fantastic, because my experience has been that faculty want to do really cool things, but they have concerns about being able to meet things like purpose security and accessibility. And so turn towards the side of caution and say, then I just won't attempt it because I don't want to do anything I shouldn't be doing for my students. And this basically takes care of it for you. And then lastly, there is gradebook integration. So gradebook integration, I know, is very important, particularly as a faculty member, because, well, we need to be able to do things, again, quite expediently often, and we don't want to add more to our plate than we need to. So being able to integrate this into D2L and connect it to the gradebook is one of the fantastic things about this tool. That said, I do want you to hopefully consider how you might use this technology without using grades. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But it is fully integratable into the grade book. And so for that reason, too, you can also edit it. So for example, if you have an activity that you want to be 50 points, then you can change that score once it's in the grade book to say it's going to be out of 50 points. It's very malleable in that way, and very straightforward. So I also think it's great for that. I do also want to stress that not all content types are meant to be graded. So there are some items that don't integrate with the gradebook strictly because they're not graded content types. So for example, dialogue cards are not a gradable item because it's not meant to be. If you want to have something similar, you could use flashcards, which is a gradable item that you could integrate into the gradebook. And now I'm kind of going through this so far. So pretty quick. Any questions so far before I show you the cute little video about how to get your account started and put things into H5P? Okay. So hopefully I'm going to press play, maybe, and this is going to work for you. And this is actually Dr. O'Neill, our latest instructional designer. He created this short GIF. It's about 1 minute, 20 seconds, to show you in a very short way how you can put this together. These slides are going to be shared with you. This GIF is going to be shared with you, so don't think you have to take some sort of notes and write everything down. I just wanted to give you a brief. This really is how simple it can be. So if you'll, there shouldn't be. There you have it. It really is that straightforward and simple. That now that was not creating the activity. Say that it wasn't creating the activity, but that was a quick, very quick way to show you, hey, once it's created, this is exactly what you have to do and where you go. So again, thank you to Dr. O'Neill for making that for us. That will be sent out to you. But it is really that simple. It's really that quick and easy to do and that easily integratable into the gradebook. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the how, and this is where we're really going to get into the GOGs. I like to refer to them as the GOGs, like BGs. So you're going to increase your variety of course material types. So as we know, when you're trying to follow universal design for learning principles, the thought process as part of that when it comes to content types is giving students a variety of content types that reiterate many of the same things so that if they're, they can listen to it or they can view it, they can read it, etc., so that they get that information in multiple ways, thereby hopefully allowing them to more deeply learn and also engage with the content type that works best for them and in multiple ways if they so choose. This H5P is another great way to do that because not only may you increase course material types, meaning maybe you make a slideshow, maybe you make an interactive video that has question slices throughout, or it's increasing opportunities for course interactivity and engagement, meaning maybe you have a course that has a lot of terminology and you do want to use a crossword puzzle to help students practice or do a formative or low stakes assessment, which is where we talk about these broader implications for grades and grading, particularly with the development of AI. I know a lot of faculty are concerned about it being used or trying to at least figure out ways in which we can mitigate the cheating aspect by still incorporating potentially some of the things that will be beneficial to students. And frankly, I also feel to faculty because AI is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be here for forever. And so trying to consider those authentic assessments that really get students deeply learning and connecting to the material instead of potentially a quiz or instead of potentially exam, which is a little bit easier depending on the question types that you have, to be able to look things up if that's not something that you want students to do. But also to allowing those practice opportunities and those opportunities to fail. Oftentimes in my conversations with faculty, I find that the primary reason why they grade everything is because of the philosophy that students will not do it if it's not graded. While there's always going to be a little truth to that, because there will always be students whose philosophy is also that way, there are a lot of students who would love to engage in more activities and do more things that aren't graded, where they don't feel like they're being judged. There's an evaluative component or a punitive component so that they can have practice opportunities and they can have these opportunities to fail. So maybe, for example, as a practice opportunity, you allow students to engage with dialogue cards, or you allow them to engage with those flashcards without them being graded so that they can practice ahead of time before that graded assessment comes up. And or allow students opportunities to fail in that give them multiple attempts. H5P allows for multiple attempts, and all they're doing every time they attempt is learning again because they have to do it again and do it again, no matter how many times you say, you say how many times they're allowed to do it. Maybe they're allowed to retake something one time, two times, three times. Again, it really depends on your philosophy, what you're trying to get your students to learn, and what your goals and purposes are for using a particular piece of content using H5P technology. I do think it's fantastic for students to have those opportunities to fail and then try again, because the reality is they don't have to try again. If they're okay with failure, we have to be okay that they're okay with failure, which is really hard. At least it is for me. Maybe it's not for others. And so allowing those areas where you say, this is your opportunity to fail and try again. This is your opportunity to practice before we go to that summative assessment or before we go to that graded assessment, to help build their confidence and to help them feel like they know the material more. And not only know the material more, but they're learning what you really want them to know because you are creating the activity for them to engage with. So it takes some of that guesswork that students often have of, well, I'm not sure exactly what my faculty member wants to know, and I'm trying to figure it out, but I don't know what's important to them versus what's important to me versus what's important to the field. And until we have that first kind of assessment, we don't learn that information from faculty to student. So if you give them practice opportunities, they have a better idea of the things that you do think are the most important for them to learn and the purpose behind why you want them to learn it. That's why I said, while the gradebook integration is fantastic and I am all for it, I actually use it. There are also a lot of areas where I don't use the gradebook integration because I give them those practice opportunities. All right, so H5P, the when and the where. So you can find out a lot about H5P by going to the workshops that we host. We do an intro workshop each fall for a few reasons. One, there's always new faculty. Two, new or faculty sometimes are able to talk to others about things that they're doing in their class that might include H5P, and the faculty member wants to find out more about it. So we typically do one of these each fall. And then we do a content showcase each spring. And so in the spring, we pick a couple of different content types, usually the ones that are either the most popular or ones that have been requested. And we literally have a building workshop where we sit quietly, virtually, and we build things together, talk about why you might want to use that particular type of content to get at whatever it is that you're trying to get at in the course. And that way everyone can ask questions and kind of work together during that process. We are also doing or our goal is to do one-on-one sessions and on-demand micro lessons. The one-on-one sessions do usually occur when we are working with faculty who are developing online courses. However, if this is something that you think your department would be interested in, we do also go to departments to go through some of this information as well. And so that not one person in the department has to be the champion for this, at least to get it started. We can come and say, okay, this is where it is, this is how it works, and talk about some of these things because we've done that a few times. We also have the goal of having more on-demand micro lessons. Basically what you saw earlier in the video that Dr. O'Neill made, we do have a goal to have more of those on our MTSU Online YouTube channel over time. It does say upcoming because, as many of you know, we have been reorganized. And so there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes to try and figure that out, which may delay some of our goals regarding this a little bit. But we are working on that. And on top of that, too, H5P does have great examples and demos that you can see that are pretty short as well. But we do feel the technology is such that we really want to brand and do our own things here, not only just for our faculty, but because we believe in this software, we believe in using it that much that we want to create in-house things so you're not farmed somewhere else to H5P. We want you to be able to see what your current faculty are doing, what the or capabilities are. When we do have faculty who allow us to share information, some do, because again, it's an open educational resource technically. We will share that kind of information also. So be on the lookout for that as we are hopefully expanding our services in regards to this as we can. And then our MTSU online YouTube channel, which has been relaunched. And we will be adding a lot more things out there, I have a feeling, as soon as we are able to with this reorganization. So now I just want to show you a couple of things that have been created in H5P. So you have some examples and we can talk a little bit about the examples. So I've mentioned crossword a few times. So the first example that I have and now I need to, are we good? Can y'all see it or no? I have to move it over here. There we go. Okay. All right, so can y'all see it now? Is that better? We're looking at a crossword puzzle. This was a crossword puzzle Dr. O'Neill actually created for new faculty orientation. We always like to do something a little fun for new faculty orientation because, well, it's a whole day, so it can be a little slow at times. So we wanted to create something fun just that faculty could do. So we made a QR code that took them to this crossword puzzle that asked them questions about MTSU or MTSU Online. Again, an example, he made the background, the MT, the bubbles, all that you see is Dr. O'Neill's creation. It doesn't come out quite this pretty originally, although the original crossword's awesome, so please don't think that it's not. But he did a great job in creating that. And crosswords are one of our most popular tools that are used on campus for a couple of reasons. One, it does integrate with the gradebook, but two, when you're learning terminology, a crossword puzzle is a great way for students to learn that terminology rather than potentially a quiz or an exam, because they're not cramming for it right beforehand, which we know students do. And we're not giving them all the information. They are going to have to look up the answers to the crossword. So they're actually spending a lot more time than they probably would cramming for a quiz, trying to get the answers to the crossword. So crosswords are pretty popular. Any questions about crossword? Okay, so then we are going to look at, once my computer stops giving me the spinning wheel of death, which is what it's doing right now.
While it's still spinning, I'll ask the question, how long do you think it took to create this crossword? Like, how much work do you think is involved, relatively speaking?
To create the crossword itself doesn't take that long. Now, I don't know about the background that says MTSU Online, because again, I don't know how to do that. I'm an instructional designer, so you would have to ask Dr. O'Neill specific to that. But crosswords themselves don't typically take that long. My only caveat to crosswords from a experience standpoint is never make them more than 20 or 25 words because they can get really long. Doesn't mean you can't have a couple of crosswords or a couple different ways that students are engaging with material, but 20 or 25 words is about the cap you want to do, because everything that you do make in H5P is dynamic. So that means it doesn't matter if it's a cell phone, a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, it's going to fit to screen. So if you have too many words, that can be a bit much. The crosswords that I have made thus far don't typically take me very long to make. The biggest thing I have to do is make sure I don't misspell things, particularly if the terminology is difficult, like nursing. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Any other questions thus far?
Yes, can I just check? So is the template provided? So basically this is a template that's provided and then we just kind of key in the words across and down. Is that it?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we
I
move
do have
on?
a quick question.
Okay.
Is it, and I might have missed you say this, I might have looked away at the wrong moment, but is this something we can do now, or is this something we need to have like further training on being able to start creating?
Oh, you can do it now.
Because I just got real excited about doing this instead of quizzes. This looks like so much more fun.
It's more fun. But yes,
Right?
you can do
And
it
I like
right
what
now.
you said about how it gets students more engaged in the material because they're having to look these things up as opposed to cramming. And I was like, no, I love this. This is fantastic.
Yay. And
Thank
that's
you.
just our example. You're welcome. The second example that I'm going to show you is an accordion. Accordions are great for chunking information. Maybe you have an assignment that has a lot of steps, or maybe they're learning steps to a process in your class, something like that. It's a great way to chunk information because it is just what it says. It's an accordion with little drop down arrows so that once one arrow is dropped down, the other one goes back up. So it chunks information in a great way in that way. The one thing about accordions that we hope that they will change at some point is you can only add text to accordions. You cannot add images. And that is something that I know has been suggested to H5P to improve. Again, they do listen, so we just don't know the timeline of that. But these, like I said, great for particularly, say, I use a lot of accordions in an art class. When the faculty person who teaches art online was really trying to get them to understand the steps in a particular artistic process. So that was one of the ways that an accordion was used, but there's multiple ways that you can use it. I've also used these for some assignments that have a lot of instructions, maybe because it has to do with, for example, coding and things like that. Because anywhere that you have an HTML box in D2L, you can embed an H5P. So it could be a descriptive box, it could be an assignment box, it could be a discussion box, it could be anywhere. But that is accordion. And then we have fill in the word. And this is fill in the word with image because, well, I feel like it's prettier to look at than fill in the word with words. But you do have both types. A couple of things about this. I write these instructions as type in the missing words or years, as this example goes, instead of fill in, because we have gotten feedback from faculty who have used this that if they say fill in, students are looking for something to literally fill in the blank. If you say type in, they know that they're supposed to type it in to the blank. So that is a little something we've learned as people have used this. Again, you can do this with just words. You can do this with images. So this might be a great way to say, for example, if you're in a humanities class and you want students to know what certain periods, what a piece of art looks like in a particular time period, things like that. You can use that for this. And again, it's a great way for students to get interacting with the content more so than just let me cram for an exam or let me cram for this quiz that I know I'm going to have to take. By the same token, drag and drop text is very similar. In that you can make containers. These are what these containers are, and you can create items that you drag to the containers, and students can tell whether or not they're doing this correctly. So for example, if you are learning theory and there is terminology specific to each theory and you want the students to be able to practice what terminology goes with what, this is a great way to do that. They hit the submit button. Oh, look, I wasn't even looking and I only missed one. Not that we want that for students, but that's how that works. So if you have items like that, that would be good for sorting out things, for differentiating things, even for comparing and contrasting to some way, because students can see this so clearly as a compare contrast if you have two different drop containers. It's a great way, again, for students to actually be engaging with and interacting with that content in D2L, not just reading, not just listening. Hopefully, maybe they're taking notes while they're watching a video or watching a lecture video or something like that, potentially in an asynchronous class, but we don't know that they are. So this is a great way to reiterate information with students, graded or not graded. I selected the items in this so you can see what it looks like when it is graded. But for students to really be able, again, to be interacting and getting interactive with that content and not just trying to absorb it in some other way. And then the last one I'm going to show you is something new to me that I'm actually creating currently. I do teach an in-person class this semester, and I don't know why it popped out. And I am not a fan of quizzes and exams because I know that students cram for them and then they forget the information oftentimes. And I want them to take it with them forever. I mean, of course I do. It's my thing. And so I've started creating a workbook for my students. So instead of having quizzes and exams, I'm creating a workbook that follows their textbook. That is a photo of their textbook. And when you create I call it a workbook. It's called an interactive book in H5P. You literally can create any kind of book that you want to. Now, for me, I'm creating a workbook because they have a textbook, but maybe there are certain things that you want to cover that aren't in a book that you're like, but I think we need to include these few things. You could create an interactive textbook for students to interact with to learn those things. So, for example, this is where the page counter is. I welcomed them to their workbook. They have instructions on what they're supposed to do in their workbook. This is going to be on page 4, and they can click this button every time that says I have finished the page. And then if you look on this next page, and hopefully you can see it pretty well, I've actually created 12 activities for my students to do for this chapter. Now, an activity may be as simple as just dragging the boxes or going through an accordion, but it also may be something like dragging the containers in the right words. It could be summary statements where they have to choose the correct statement out of each 4, and there's 4 different sets of statements. I put what they don't call a quiz tool, but what is H5P's quiz tool right here, where I ask them 8 questions just in this one activity. Then they go back to doing this. Then they go back to doing this. So this is my way of having them engage with the content and hopefully learn it in a way that's a little more authentic to them, that mitigates cheating. There's not much AI you can do in this. I'm sure at some point somebody will figure it out, but there's not much you can do in that. And I do these kinds of things over and over so that I know the students are getting out of the text what I think is most important for them to carry forward. And that's what I do instead of exams and quizzes. I did ask my students, because they have done one of these so far, because what they do, they're allowed to check their scores. I allow them to multiple attempts, whether or not again, if they're happy with a C, great. I wouldn't be happy with that, but that's me. And when they get done, they literally have this summary and submit page that tells them this is how they did. Now, clearly I haven't answered anything on this. But it tells them how much progress they've made, how many interactions there are. Did you check the pages off? Did you complete each of these activities? And what was your score? And this is what I integrate into my grade book as their quizzes and exams. So the students have completed their first workbook, and I did ask for feedback, and they unanimously said as a group that they much prefer those to exams and quizzes, and they felt like they learned a lot more material because they weren't cramming for it. So again, that's anecdotal. That's from the students. I literally got that feedback on Monday. I warned them that the class wasn't going to be easy, even though they didn't have tests and exams. And I will say, when the first workbook was shown and I gave them an idea of what it was, there was an audible groan. Sounded like, because they realized they were going to actually have to do a lot of work, but they appreciated the opportunity to do things multiple times. And they're already starting to talk in the language that I need them to talk in, because they've had so many opportunities over and over and over to learn it. So that's exciting as a faculty member for me, because this is new for me. So those are all the different types of examples I have at this moment. And then we do have, let me go back to sharing the correct screen again. We do have content that is meant to be, there we go, that is meant to be cloned. Oops, went too far. And that's what this is. And we love some share around here. So this is the stuff that's meant to be shared. I don't know if you'll hear the music or not. And so, as someone asked earlier, you can have access to everything that's in here, and they're all linked here for templates for faculty to use. So for this particular workshop, you will find everything and more that I showed you here. And if it has a green folder next to it, that means it's been shared with the organization. The only thing that we ask is please don't change it without cloning it first, which you do right here using these 3 buttons and hit the clone button. That's all you have to do to clone it. So I literally just cloned it as soon as it pops up. And I'm gonna say, clone that please. And now it's been cloned, and you can save it wherever you want to save it in your H5P toolkits. H5P is set up like a file folder system. So if you want, once you create an H5P account, we do recommend attaching your name to that root file folder so that it's easy for you and anyone else for that matter to search and find you. And then putting your specific courses as course folders under your name so that they're easy for you to find. But yes, everything, like I said, I showed you is easily clonable, so you don't have to start from scratch. So if you want to go out there and clone this particular crossword puzzle because you think it looks really neat in the background, go for it. You can do that and save it for yourself. And then we've also provided a list of examples. I actually should say resources. That's a screw up on my part. It should say resources about some H5P things that are out there already. So the content types, demos, and applications from H5P. There's a great study from Portland Press about using interactive or using H5P for interactive laboratory practicals. It continues to move up the list for the top tools for learning list. It was in the 70s, and now it's roughly in the 40s or 50s. Merlot is a great OER out there, and they have a revised and remixed section with H5P. So if there is a content that you don't see as part of our items, but you want to go, hey, is there something out there that I can clone and save for myself? You could do so at Merlot. And then they have a really great article about how interactivity and student satisfaction and persistent to learning, showing that relationship with the more interactivity, the more likely students are to be satisfied, to persist, and to be motivated. And then, of course, we always have the taxonomies. We want to make sure using H5P that we're still supporting pedagogy. That's why I call them the Gojis. And this article directs specifically to talking about Bloom's taxonomy. And then for my Ohio State fan, the Ohio State University, they have an awesome area on their website about H5P for creating that content, including examples. So there's even some more examples out there as well. And that is pretty much all I have other than any questions, concerns, issues. We do have a quick little game code there. We would love it if you would go to h5p.com and type in that game code and give us a little feedback. You should be able to access it, hopefully, fingers crossed. But what questions do you have? Thanks for coming. We're here to help.
Tara, the biggest question so far is how to get started. And I've included information, our handout on how to set up an account, but you might want to walk through that just a little bit.
So if you go to h5p.com and select the login option, you should be able to log in using your Middle Tennessee address. And it should locate your single sign-on through that, because you should log in with your single sign-on just like you do anything else you log into for MTSU. So if you go and try to log in using your single sign-on and your password, it may ask you a couple of questions the first time. you do that, but then essentially it should be done. The other way that you can create an account is using that short gift that Tim created. If you go into any D2L shell that you have that's old, don't pick one that's active, pick something that's old or is a sandbox you play in, something like that. And you go into any HTML box, click inside that box. And if you use that insert button or insert stuff button that looks like the pause, play, help, no, not help, pause, play, stop, record. If you click on that and scroll to the bottom and click on H5P, you can also make an account through there. Should walk you through and ask, are you who you say you are, et cetera, et cetera. It should be that simple, hopefully. There was an update just recently to H5P, but I don't think any of that information changed. So the instructions that were posted in the chat should work for creating an account. I'm right about that, Scott, aren't I? If Scott's still on here, nothing changed about that, correct? Other questions? Concerns? We went through this pretty quick because it really is an introduction and is meant to be as such. But you have us here for a little while longer, so don't think that your questions have to be just about H5P if we can help. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Were there any questions that came through that I missed or?
Looks like most people were thinking this was really cool. We agree. And I would say, again, I don't know that we've got our dates picked out for the showcase, but if
Right.
anybody would like to learn more about what some of the specific items are and how to create those, I would say get in touch with your MTSU online ID. Or
Most
start with
definitely.
Tara. Or start with Tara,
Well, and again, this will also be put on our YouTube channel. I hope that we shared the slides with you in the chat, but we'll make sure that they're sent out to participants if they weren't.
I haven't shared the slides themselves.
And then are there any questions you have about why you might use this, where you might use it, an idea that you have, but you're not sure if there's a tool, like maybe I'd like to do this. Is there a tool that might work for that? Anything like that? All right. Quiet group today. That's okay.
And Tara, we might have some folks who are having trouble with the emoji word cloud that you've got. Could you show that? The
Yes.
activity at the end?
Yes. Give me just a second.
And while she's showing that again, to reiterate, if you're not able to log in at the H5P site directly, start with D2L, go into an old course shell, go into edit, add content, make sure you're in the HTML editor, click on insert stuff, and then scroll down to add H5P item. That should then bring up the place where you can actually create an account. And that's what the attached instructions walk you through.
All right. I am sharing my screen right now. Can y'all see it now?
Yes.
Okay. You should be able to just type in that game code that's listed there, because it is a word cloud. Someone was able to do it. Are there any other questions? No? All right. Well, that's all our formal information. So if I know everybody has places to be and things to do. So again, we're going to stay around a little bit longer just to answer any questions if needed. But otherwise, we hope that you appreciate this session. It will be put on our YouTube channel. I'm going to say by next week. And we hope you have a fantastic day. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was super helpful.
Awesome. We like to hear that. All right, y'all. It's quick today. It's super quick. Hi.
Have you, so we'll just edit out the recording at the end. Good to go with the recording?
You're still recording.